And we are pleased to be joined this evening by the Cleveland Rotary Club, not Radio Club. I was thinking of Eddie Ramsey, who's one of our questioners tonight. The Cleveland Rotary Club, in presenting once again to you a political forum to make certain that you, the voters, and the citizens of our community receive the unfiltered information from the candidates for a very, very important position in our state government. Tonight we are pleased to present to you the forum showing the two candidates for the new 10th State Senate District, which includes Bradley County and Hamilton County. This is a new district for Bradley County, and our candidates this evening, we will allow them to introduce themselves to you, but the candidates are, to my immediate left, Andre McGarry, who is the Democrat nominee for the 10th State Senate seat, and to his left is Mr. Todd Gardenhire. Mr. Gardenhire is the Republican nominee for the 10th State Senate seat. Our questioners this evening, we are pleased to have with us a perennial favorite of questioners from the Cleveland Daily Banner, Mr. David Davis, and from WCLE Radio, Mr. Eddie Ramsey. Our format this evening will be the candidates will be allowed to introduce themselves to you and can take up to 3 minutes. They're not required to take their time, all of their time. Then the questions will be alternated back and forth between the candidates with a 2-minute closing for each of the candidates at the conclusion of the questioning. We are so happy, and thank you so much to Cleveland State Community College for allowing us to use this wonderful Johnson Theater, and it's such a great facility for an event like this. And thank you very much to all of the people who have worked so hard to allow this facility to be used tonight here. Thank you, Mr. and Ms. Wright, thank you so much. Gentlemen, you've heard my presentation of the format. We have a timer who is seated immediately in front of you, and that's one of the things that we do. We follow the time limitations. By toss of the coin, this evening we will begin by an introduction by Mr. Andre McGarry. Mr. McGarry, welcome to Cleveland State Community College in Bradley County. Introduce yourself to the people of the 10th State Senate.
Thank you, Mr. Logan. It is a pleasure to be here. To begin, I'd like to thank the Kiwanis Club, Rotary, as well as the Bar Association for hosting this event. Also to Cleveland State, thank you so much for your hospitality and opening up your doors. It is a good feeling to be up here in front of you as citizens and as those who are concerned about the state of our local and state government. I currently serve on City Council where I have to deal with some very rough issues in the city of Chattanooga. And so I understand, and by the way, is my mic going in and out?
Yes, go ahead and make sure it's close to you there.
There we go. Can I use yours?
You got it.
I currently serve as a councilman for the city of Chattanooga. I understand that, well, we're getting a little pop.
It's okay, go ahead.
All right, we'll keep going. And to those who are at home listening on the radio, please pardon the pop in the microphone. Over the past 4 years, I've had to deal with some very rough issues, whether that's a property tax increase or whether that's pilots that brought in Amazon, Volkswagen, and a host of other businesses. It's been my desire to always serve. And let me be perfectly honest with you, I am the underdog in this race. But being the underdog doesn't bother me in the slightest, because I understand that many of you also understand what it feels like to be the underdog. Whether you are at a place of work where you're concerned about whether you'll have a job tomorrow, whether you know people who are out of work, whether you know people who are underinsured or don't have any insurance at all, we are all facing rough times, and we feel to some degree that the system is against us. And I certainly understand that, and I certainly desire to represent individuals and families who have experienced tough times. I'm a family man. I have 5 children. My wife joins me tonight, as well as my youngest daughter. And I understand what it means to make tough decisions, what it means to actually have to put a lot of difficult situations in front of you and try to make the best decision. I've done that personally. I've done that for my family. I've done it also on an elected level. And I would certainly hope to do it in Bradley County. As an individual who lives in Hamilton County, I would want to assure you my desire is not to only represent Hamilton County, but to represent both Bradley and Hamilton County. Due to the actions of the majority party on the state level, this district unfortunately has been chopped up, and for the first time in a long time, Bradley County is divided. And that's unfortunate because many of you feel, whether you live in the city or whether you live in the surrounding county area, that your voice may not be heard. I assure you that if I am elected and have the honor to win your trust to become the next state senator for this district, that I will represent you. And I'll represent you in a manner where you would recognize that I am not seeking to put party first, but to put principle first. I recognize that it's important that we operate from values and not from who's going to write you the biggest paycheck. My life, in brief, I'm sure if you go on my website, you will see that I have come from poverty, but I do not have an entitlement mindset. I have worked for everything that I have achieved, whether that be education, whether that be otherwise. I do not expect people just to give me a free pass. I want to earn your trust, and I hope to earn your vote, and I hope ultimately to serve you well as your next state senator. Thank you so much.
Mr. Gardenhire, welcome to Cleveland State Community College again, and thank you for your participation. Tell the people of the 10th District who Todd Gardenhire is.
I'm Todd Gardenhire. I was born at Erlanger Hospital in Chattanooga, Tennessee, the same hospital that a lot of folks in Bradley County use for their trauma care, for their neonatal situations, for other emergency services that you don't have here in Bradley County. It's good to be back at Cleveland State. I was a student here back in 1969 and 70, so I understand Cleveland State. I understand the importance of it, and I understand how that Cleveland State is able to operate in a different manner than a four-year institution. I understand Bradley County. It's my understanding that the city of Cleveland limits and the city of Chattanooga city limits are just 5 miles apart. I live closer to the city of Cleveland than I do in downtown Chattanooga. I'm up in Bradley County and Cleveland all the time on business. I know the people up here. I've worked in Bradley County for 42 years with people involved in civics, in politics, and in business. And business is what makes this county so great because it's grown by leaps and bounds better than any other county in the state. Why should anybody vote for me? I'm 64 years old. I'm not looking to build my resume. I'm not looking to use this as a stepping stone anywhere. The only stones I'm ever going to get in the future is a kidney stone and a tombstone somewhere down the road. I'm here to serve the people, to do a good job, to give back to the community what I've been fortunate enough to have over my lifetime. I've got an extra 30 years of lifetime experiences that I can share with other people, and I can work with other people. I've seen how things work. I've seen how things work on a massive level. I was chairman of the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation. We had a budget of over $65 billion, and for 2.5 years, I was the chairman of that organization. I know how to work with municipal budgets and governmental budgets. I have the experience in business to understand a balance sheet, to understand what taxes do, and most important, I understand what unintended consequences are when you have actions and you don't really know what the future holds. That's the key to whoever serves you for the next 4 years, is how do you avoid the unintended consequences that may be bad, and how do you help the unintended consequences that may be good. That's where my experience in life, in politics, in business, and as a family person gives me the edge. I have 3 children. I have 4 grandchildren. I have a special need grandchild. I understand the needs of families. I understand the needs of parents. I understand grandparents and the roles they have to play in raising the children. I've done that. I understand my religious foundation. I'm a member of Highland Park Baptist Church in Chattanooga, one of the oldest churches in this area. I was a counselor at Camp Joy. I've been involved in Bethel Bible Village, and I understand how children need the parental influence and need the guidance of somebody that they can respect in the life choices that they make. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Gardenhire, as a result of this rotation, you're going to be asked the first question of the evening. We understand that one of the hottest topics that the legislature will face is continuing interest in education. A new introduction to that issue has been the proposal by several legislators of putting Tennessee into the private education voucher system, where that state funds would be diverted to parents who chose to send their children to private schools. There are various proposals regarding that issue. Can you tell us what you see as the benefits and/or the detriments of the introduction of private school vouchers into Tennessee's education funding system?
I'm glad you had in that question the part about the parents having the choice, because that's the most important thing there is. Parents need to be empowered to choose where their children go to school to get the best education. Put it in a very short answer, I'm for vouchers. Vouchers doesn't necessarily take money from public education. There's two types of monies that go to in the BEP formula, the basic part and the part that follows the students. The students can go to any other school they want to and use that voucher, or they can go to a private school. But the facts are the amount of money they have to travel with is not that great. But it is enough to help them make the choice. If they see that their child is not getting the education that they need, they can make the choice and move it. Now, the important thing is, in the bill that was introduced the last time, it only affected the 4 major counties. It did not affect Bradley County. It affected Hamilton, Knox, Davidson, and Shelby County. And that's important because they want to see it there first, because those are the schools and the school systems that need to have the ability to transfer from school to school, be it public school to school or public to private.
Right. Mr. McGarry, what do you see as the benefits and the detriments of the introduction of the private school vouchers from public funds be?
Thank you for the question, and I will begin by telling you that my daughter attended public school over in the area in which we live, which is downtown Chattanooga. And after her first year of kindergarten, we received a letter, my wife and I, stating that the school that she was attending was placed on the failing school list. And as a parent, my wife and I had to make a very difficult decision, whether to pull our daughter out of this failing school or whether to put her in private school or whether to homeschool her. We decided to put her in private school. So we had an opportunity for a brief moment to experience private school, ultimately to pull her out, and now we homeschool our children. So we've seen education on a wide variety of fronts, and we recognize that, yes, choice is very important to many parents. But I would say this, that I wish upon no parent the hard decision of having to determine whether or not to pull your child out of a school because it's failing. It's a very tough decision to make. And the reality is that as a state, we have continually chosen not to pour money into our basic education program, but actually to pull money out of it, particularly here at Cleveland State, as well as UTC and other state institutions. We've seen tuition go up as a result of dollars being pulled out. So certainly we can say that there are benefits to the voucher system, but ultimately I am not for a voucher system because I believe it short skirts the issue. And the issue is we need to adequately fund education so that we do not have schools whereby students are pulled out only to go to other schools, and those schools that are in need of assistance don't receive the assistance they need. I think it's important, regardless whether you live in the mountain or whether you live in the valley, that you have adequate and above adequate exposure and opportunity to attend a quality public education school, and those sort of schools and those sorts of things are the things I would be more than happy to support and work for.
Just to follow up, Mr. Gardenhire, with reference to the adequacy of the funding for education in Tennessee, as raised by Mr. McGarry, do you think that there needs to be more funding for public education?
I said earlier that more funding, it's been proven that more funding doesn't necessarily help the quality of education. There's one thing you cannot pick on, and that's the teachers. The teachers are doing a great job with what they have. What you can, and we have two different, in District 10, we have three different systems here. We have the Hamilton County School System, which is a totally different animal than the Bradley County or City Council. And just to throw money at education and to throw extra and new money, I don't think that's appropriate at all. But what I would love to see is I would love to see the redirection of money. And I think higher education, and that is the four-year colleges and four-year institutions, get way too much money. They're not productive. They don't offer the right kind of courses. Take that money away from them. Make them be competitive. You know, it's kind of strange. We have basically a voucher system as it is in higher education with the grants that they get, the students that do well in school, they get this extra money, a little scholarship to go, and they can choose any college they want to go to. And that's in essence a voucher system for higher education. If it works for higher education, then why can't it work for lower education? And it ought to.
Mr. McGarry, let me just ask another question to follow up on that,
Sure.
to give you an opportunity to comment. One of the questions which we asked during the primary campaign was, what can we do to reduce the cost of higher education, where the percentage rates have gone up from 9 to 5% every year. The point raised by Mr. Gardenhire about the cost of higher education. Is there anything, do you have any ideas relating to that?
Well, I think we need to look at the facts, and the reality is this. And there was a study that was performed that said only a quarter, that's 25% of all eligible Tennesseans have a 4-year college degree. As a state, we are underperforming. The question is why? And I think, again, it's really simple. We need to look at things in terms of investment. You can't put a penny in and expect to get $100 out. You can't short-term or short-change education and expect to get a valuable return. And what we put in, we definitely get out. Now, per capita, per head, per student, we as a state are in one of the last quintiles in the entire nation. We cannot continually expect to produce quality educated individuals if we are not willing to make the investment. And this is where my opponent and I would disagree. He would say it's new money, no new money, it's throwing good money after bad. I wholeheartedly disagree. As a result of my activities on City Council, I am aware that one of the things businesses want, Amazon, Vockert, Volkswagen, they want quality educated workers. Now, if they can't get quality educated workers, they'll take our tax dollars via pilot programs or elsewise and go outside the state to recruit. These are your tax dollars now drawing businesses in, but businesses are now saying we don't have the people to perform the jobs. Whose fault is that? Where do people go, the workforce development training programs that are necessary to ensure that we're able to compete, that our children, yours and mine, are able to take a hold of these quality jobs? Yes, I think it's very important, particularly in this last year when the state was running a surplus. One of the first things we did is we offered tax breaks. At the same time, we saw our higher education institutions saw their budgets decrease. I don't think that this is really difficult. I think it's a matter of priorities. And I would say that our children and the next generation of workers is a priority, and we need to put our money where our mouth is.
Mr. Gardenhire, a good point that you made regarding those things, but the higher cost of education is what I'm trying to address. Mr. McGarry, as I understand his response, is increased funding for those institutions to lower tuition. What do you think we can do to lower the cost or make higher education less expensive for students, where they come out with these $30,000 to $50,000 to $100,000 student loans and things? Do you have any ideas about that?
It's strange that this question should come up, because I was at a meeting with the governor, and there were representatives from UTC, representative from Cleveland State, representatives from Volcker, Volkswagen, Unum, all the major employers in this area in a meeting. And finally, after all the talk back and forth about the niceties and stuff, finally the HR person from Unum looked over at the chancellor of UTC and said, when are you going to start training people and offering degrees in subject matters that we can use when we hire people? You're turning out the wrong kind of graduates for us to hire. And that's the major problem with the cost of the university. The universities set their curriculum around the tenured teachers that are there, not around what the marketplace says we have to have. And the marketplace has been telling the higher educations of this community and across the state, you're not teaching the children and the students that you have to what we can use. They're talking about having well-rounded education and all this stuff. People that hire people, the Volkers, the Volkswagens, the Unums, the other companies, Blue Cross, they want somebody that comes out of the colleges and university that can do it. Thank heavens we have the Cleveland states and the Chattanooga states that finally have the flexibility to offer the kind of courses that can train children. Not every child needs a higher education. Maybe only 10% need a higher education in the 4-year schools. People want a career They want a job that they can have for a long time, and they want to be trained in that and not just have a general educational degree that when they get out, as they said when Unum questioned the guy, said, quit turning out sports management majors and turn out something that we can use. That's going to be the first thing we can do to stop this spiraling education, paying for people to teach that aren't really necessary to here, and get it under control.
Mr. McGarry, brief response to that.
Yes, I appreciate the opportunity. You know, I don't think it's our job necessarily to tell institutions, UTC, Bradley, Cleveland State, or elsewhere, Chattanooga State, that they are putting out the wrong type of students. If students desire to participate in a certain subject or they have a certain concentration that they want to pursue, that's their choice. And if the college recognizes that there's enough demand for that particular program, they should offer it. It's that simple. At the same time, when we talk about workforce development programs, I think we have to recognize, as I've been alluding to, there's a cost. And if we're not willing to be serious about that cost, we can say all day that higher education institutions are inadequate or they're not necessarily putting out the right type of student. But until we're willing to say what's the actual physical cost to that, financial cost to that, and look into that, I think we won't move forward.
Thank you, Mr. McGarry. Mr. Davis, do you have a question for our state Senate candidates?
Building the new Whirlpool plant has resulted in a brownfield in downtown Cleveland. What services can the state provide in developing a plan which will best serve all of Bradley County in redeveloping the property from Church Street to Wildwood Avenue? In this regard, what is your position relative to expanding funds in redeveloping the downtown area versus promoting development along the interstate?
Mr. Gardenhire, that you're the first responder to that question.
If you want to talk about brownfield, and if the community leaders that you've elected in Bradley County want to go to the route of using the brownfield money, then you bring in the EPA, which is a federal agency, not a state agency. But you have to go through a state agency to apply for that. If the elected officials of Bradley County want to go that route, then I'll do everything I can to help them facilitate that and do what's needed. However, the best way to fill up those buildings down there is not by using those federal grants and things, because with federal grants comes a lot of strings attached. The best way to do it is recruit businesses to come downtown. If the marketplace is telling you that businesses or whoever doesn't want to be downtown, they want to be out near the interstate, then the marketplace may have it right. But if you want to go to the EPA and apply for that grant, then I'd be willing to do whatever I can to help them do that. But my first choice will be let private enterprise dictate where businesses and people need to locate.
Mr. McGarry, brownfield redevelopment,
yes.
Necessary, needed, or just unnecessary, let the private enterprise take care of it?
Well, I think the first response is I don't think the state has the answer to this particular question. And your question was, what would the state do? I think this is a local issue. And again, I appeal to my time on city council where we've dealt with pilots in business recruitment, incentives, other forms of economic incentives to attract people. I had a conversation with Mr. Gary Farlow, who of course is your director of your Cleveland Chamber, and he was talking to me about this particular issue, and we had a wonderful conversation. And the essence of it was this. He said part of the problem was, of course, when Whirlpool came, there were a lot of strings already attached in regards to how many people they would employ, how much land they would need, so forth and so on. Then, of course, when they recognized that they needed to expand and the directions and opportunities for expansion entailed that they actually had to move into residential neighborhoods, that started another conversation. Well, in light of what has happened, and you are all aware, I'm sure, of what the plans Whirlpool has, there has become a question of what's the next step. And my response, as I was listening to Mr. Farlow, is really simple. We need to make sure that people who have skin in the game are at the table. That's not the state. That's not the state telling you how to run your pilot program, who to recruit, who not to recruit. That's making sure that neighborhoods and people from the chamber and your elected officials on a state level are having a conversation with your local elected officials so that everyone is brought to the table and everyone is able to look at this from a eye-level approach. In regards to the brownfields, as you have raised. Of course, one of the only ways to deal with this is through federal dollars. And I know in the city of Chattanooga, we deal with brownfields through federal dollars. If you want to go that approach, as has been mentioned, there are certain things that need to be considered. Ultimately, if you want to attract business and you want to recruit people, that's an incentive process that, again, needs to be talked about carefully to ensure that everyone is at the table and we're not just prescribing a one-size-fits-all approach that may not necessarily fit your situation here. Thank you.
Mr. Ramsey, do you have a question for the state Senate candidates?
Yes, I do. This is a question that, or a subject that has always been controversial, and it will continue to be controversial, not only in our area, but nationwide. What are the merits or demerits, or the pros and cons of the Safe Commute Act? And for those in the audience who may not know what the Safe Commute Act is, the Safe Commute Act is an act which would allow people to carry guns into the premises of their employer, even though their employer might disagree with them bringing the gun onto the premises.
Mr. McGarry, that's a hot topic.
Yes,
Guns
it is.
In the Tennessee legislature received national publicity.
Yes, it is. And unfortunately, what it has done is it's pit business people, the people who create jobs, against workers. And I think this should not be. We all know that the Second Amendment to the Constitution grants us the right to bear arms, and I believe responsible citizens should have that right, and I certainly am not one who want to take that right away. However, I do think that this is a particular situation where we need to look and, again, think very long and hard about the consequences of allowing individuals to take guns onto private property where the private property owner does not have any say in the matter. Look, if you brought a gun to my house, I have the right to tell you, please do not bring that gun inside on my private property. All of a sudden now, business owners should not be afforded that same right. How is that not so? I agree with the Majority Speaker, Gerald McCormick, where he said, you know, the legislature should be run by the legislators, not by the NRA. And at present, we have the NRA that has waged war against our legislatures. And as said, I recall one lady, many of you may know, who was elected and had served faithfully and was a proud proponent of the NRA. When she made one decision against the NRA, they levied $7,000 to kick her out. And they were sending a message that if you do not vote with us 100% of the time, we will come against you. Now, I am not in any way suggesting the NRA should disband. They do quality work. But there comes a point where you must draw the line. I am prepared to draw the line. I am willing to listen to the NRA. I'm willing to hold the good ideas and say, let's move forward. But this particular idea of the Safe Commute Act, I think is a very bad idea, and it's one that does not need to move forward.
Thank you. Mr. Gardenhire, you may recall that this question came up during the primary election. Shockingly to some people, this again was the most prevalently asked question. More people asked the question about this than any other question. Tells you something, doesn't it?
It does. Someone asked me after the primary was over, what were the two hottest topics that you heard about, expecting to hear about jobs and everything else, and this one particular bill was the most prominent question asked by me everywhere I went. But let's talk about it. Let's really understand what this is. This Safe Commute Act was designed for people to bring their guns if they wanted to or had to bring it in the parking lots. It did not bring the guns into the workplace itself. Now look, there's a philosophical difference here. I'm one of these people that believe if I'm a responsible individual, I have a gun permit. I've gone to safety classes. I keep my gun locked up in my car. I keep it unloaded. I keep the clip locked up in somewhere else. But I need that to go to and from work because I might feel I'm going through an area that may not be safe, or my wife may want to go through somewhere that may not be safe. And in order to get to work, or in order to go pick up the kids at school, or in order to go to the grocery store or to the doctor or down to the hospital, they want to have that extra feeling of safety. And when they get in the parking lot, inside their car is their gun locked up and is responsible. But some people want to punish everybody for the deeds of a few people that can never be controlled by laws, never be controlled by moral values, can never be controlled by anything else. You can't punish good, law-abiding, responsible people for those people, the crazies that will do anything. you can't stop that. But you shouldn't punish people that are responsible. Now, do businesses have the right to say that? My company has a strict policy, no guns in our workplace. I honor that. I have a gun permit. I've gone to the safety classes. From time to time, I have to carry a gun. But I respect that, and respectable people can get along, and we can work with the Chamber of Commerce's and work this issue out.
Brief response to that, if I may, since I went first.
Yes.
I don't think that this is a question of punishing people. And I think that's the wrong approach. I think it's recognizing the rights that we are granted by the Constitution, and we have private property rights. And to run amok of those, I think, opens the door for a lot of other things that could happen. And I think it's important for us to draw the line here and say, yes, you can be a responsible gun owner. However, private property must be respected.
Thank you. Mr. Davis, your question, please, for the candidates. And again, this is Mr. Gardenhire.
The more pressure Chattanooga puts on gang activity, the more pressure that puts on rural areas and smaller areas like Bradley County to deal with the gang problem. Is that a local issue or is that a state issue?
Mr. Gardenhire, gang problems.
Dealing with gangs is a total issue. A lot of these gangs are nationwide organized crime, whether they be what we used to call the mafia, whether it used to be the Dixie Mafia, whether it used to be where it is the Bloods or the Crips or whatever. Those are national crime organizations. And you have to have total support all the way up and down the line to do it, from the federal to the state to the local, but it must be mostly controlled by the local community with everybody else giving their support. Right now, we have so many different laws and regulations that monitor these things. There hasn't been a real coordinated effort between them, and it's just now starting to come to pass as people start recognizing that there is a major problem, and it throws people outside their comfort zone. And if you've got this gang problem that you say is, and I agree with you, that's pushing the problems out into the suburbs, then that makes it more important for law-abiding people that want to protect themselves and honor their Second Amendment right to be able to protect themselves against these gangs that are everywhere selling drugs to everybody. We've got some counties in this state that if you go knock on every third door, you're going to open up a meth house. And so it's not just confined to the inner city, it's everywhere. And that has to be addressed by every type of asset we have to throw at it.
Mr. McGarry, sitting on the city council, I hear that they deal with that issue about gang problems. What do you see as the response to gang problems, and what role, let me expand this, and of course, Mr. Gardner, I'm going to let you respond to this. What role can the state play in dealing with this gang problem?
Yes. So I can draw from personal experience here. Again, being on city council, we are a local body that creates laws, creates legislation. And as a state senator, it would be my desire to create legislation on a state level. And the answer to the question is there should be a partnership that exists between your local municipalities and your states, principally in the area of legislation, principally in the area of law as concerning what happens when an individual picks up a gun in concert of his peers or her peers and performs some action, criminal action against another individual. What laws are in place to ensure that there are certain behaviors that receive a stiff penalty? Now, that's what happened recently. You may recall the RICO Act, City of Chattanooga City Council, particularly one of my colleagues, Deborah Scott. I was on the subcommittee along with another council person where he looked very closely at this issue. Here's what we found. Gangs are everywhere. They're not just in the city. They're in the county. They move from the county to the city, back from the city to the county. They're everywhere. Gangs primarily involve drug trade and arms trade, right? So when you're talking about meth, when you're talking about crack cocaine, when you're talking about guns, these things keep gang activity moving and keep it going. And so what we found was that we had to take a comprehensive approach. It's not just your city council person. It's also your churches. It's your schools. It's your nonprofits. It takes a community approach where everyone is involved on a different level to prevent gang activity. It's very easy to come in on the back end and say, lock them up, send them away, because now someone has done a criminal activity. What options are there on the front end? Which now leads us back to the question was raised concerning jobs, proper education. These things keep someone from crime. One of the number one points we found studying this issue was this. The number one thing that keeps someone from joining a gang is having viable options. Viable options. What sort of school are they going to? What sort of job options will they have once they finish school? These things keep people from gangs, and if they're not in place, we just have this factory where we're constantly catching that issue on the back end, but we're not looking at it on the front end.
Mr. Gardenhire, the role of a state senator in which you've got a community that's got a gang problem, what can the state do? We talk about these local issues, churches being involved in those things, but has that really proven to be effective?
It obviously haven't proven to be effective, or we wouldn't be having this gang growth that we have. I've advocated for a long time that we need to have these trade schools in the inner cities, both in Cleveland and in Chattanooga, to where they can get to. We have a trade school now in Hamilton County, but it's way up in Sequoia. And everywhere I go, I say, can your kid get up to Sequoia? No, they can't. We need to have a Kirkland-type trade school so these kids can learn a living. You know, there's no sense having a minimum wage job when they can make $5,000 a day on the street selling drugs. We need to have children that are trained for a career and a job. Now, what can the state do? The state can work with the local people. They can make sure that what laws there are enforced. Unfortunately, the state closed down Taft Center up in Pikeville, which I would have voted against that. I think they needed the old Pikeville School for Boys and not close it down, because that was a place where young people could go. Maybe they weren't hardcore criminals, but when you put them over in a Nashville penitentiary, they become hardcore criminals, and they become members of a gang because they have to survive.
Though this is not a part of the format, each of you are talking about jobs and you're talking about education, the two issues that many people think. Let me just interpose this question, and Mr. McGarry, if you'll respond first. Jobs, jobs, jobs. That's what we've heard at the national level. What can we do in the state of Tennessee, independent of the federal government and through the legislature, to promote jobs, jobs, jobs?
I think first we need to take a regional approach, and it's one of the reasons I indicated that as a state senator, it would be my desire to work both in Hamilton County and Bradley County together. Let's be honest, if we want to talk about economic development, it takes land. And if you want to bring in a big company like Amazon or Vockert, you're talking 100,000 square feet, something to that effect, 1,000 square feet to make that happen. There's only so many parcels of land where that can happen. I know in Chattanooga, Enterprise South was one of those parcels, and now Volkswagen and Amazon are there. There's virtually no space left. So what does that mean? Does that mean that we continue to try to bring other big box players to Hamilton County? I think not. I think we need to look at that a job in Hamilton County can affect Bradley, and a job in Bradley can affect Hamilton County. We need to take a regional approach. And dare I say it, I'm not against even looking at possibly connecting and partnering with individuals in Dalton to make sure that we understand that this is all one big unit, one big area, and we must work together. I, again, have been on city council where I've been part of pilots to Amazon and Volkswagen and others, so I understand what it means to bring about economic development. I voted on a pilot for Amazon. I voted on a pilot for Volkswagen, so I understand a good deal when I see one. And I recognize that municipalities, and this goes back to the question concerning Whirlpool, municipalities must have the freedom and the flexibility to work with their local chambers to do what they deem best in their particular area. If the state comes in too hard and too strict, basically trying to give, more power on a state level, that cripples a local area and their ability to create jobs. So I think it's important for us to recognize that our local municipalities, in connection with the chambers, have an opportunity, boots on the ground, to work in a regional approach. And I think this will continue to allow our area to grow and expand and bring jobs into our area.
Again, Mr. Gardenhire, a question that is a repeat question was asked. This is the second most requested question, is what can our state do to continue to enhance the employment in our state? Jobs, jobs, jobs.
I would rather phrase that question of careers, careers, careers. We spend millions of dollars attracting companies to come here. We give them an enormous tax breaks. We do everything in the power of the local governments to give them all this infrastructure that they need. But when they get here, there's nobody qualified to work. They have to go hire people from outside. Volker and Volkswagen both are hiring people from outside. What good does that do really our community, our citizens, our voters in this district, if they are not trained to get these jobs? What can the state do? The state needs to enforce somehow, and I don't know how to skin the cat, but there's got to be a way to skin the cat. And in my opinion, it's got to be done through the local community colleges, because the major four-year institutions can't do it because they're too restrictive in what they can teach. But get the local community college to offer these courses as they're doing now, but give them more flexibility to train the type of workers that these companies that we've paid all this money to and we've given everything to come here, our local community, so they can hire local people. That's what the state can do. It's career, 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 not job, job, jobs. Job, job, jobs is going to somebody from Louisiana or Michigan or somewhere else moving down here. Doesn't do our people any good.
Brief response.
Yes.
It's a misrepresentation to say we're giving jobs or we're giving money away to these businesses. That's not how it works. And again, as someone on city council, I have a firsthand experience of how it actually happens. It's based on a company's ability to make an investment in this community. Volkswagen has made a $1 billion investment in this community. Amazon has also made a multi-million-dollar investment in this community, Hamilton and Bradley. And we say as a state, we say as a local community, based on your investment, the level of your investment, you are now eligible for certain tax breaks, usually property tax breaks or the like. So I don't think that we are moving down the wrong path. And when we talk about actually holding them accountable, that does happen on a local level. I've seen it. I've been there. We understand that local municipalities have that responsibility.
Thank you. Mr. Davis, I know the headlines tomorrow are going to be jobs or careers and education. Is there another area which you might have a question for? Do you have a question, please?
I have one more question about education and jobs. I don't understand if we have such a hard time educating our workforce. How does Mexico educate their workforce? I mean, we just lost another auto manufacturing company to Mexico. Why?
Mr. Gardenhire, we're not just competing with other states, we're competing with other nations for these factories and the expansions of our manufacturers. How do we do that? What is it that the other countries have that we don't have in terms of education?
One of the things that Tennessee, several things that Tennessee has going for it, is we have a right-to-work state, number one. Right now, we do not have an income tax. Soon, we won't have an inheritance tax. We have a state budget that is in great shape. They've balanced the budget. They've been able to stay within what the expenditures have been. And when you can operate in an environment like that, you can help bring people back to this state and do it. Now, Mexico can offer almost no wages to people. There's all sorts of incentives. They don't give out cash as such, but they give incentives because it's a low-wage state. And it's hard to compete, so you've got to have something else to entice a business to come here. A lot of the problems that some of these companies are running into aren't a function of the state or local municipalities. It's a function of the national problems that they have to face with. But I think Tennessee is in a great situation to be a leader in bringing and keeping businesses here. We're going to lose some, we're going to win some. But it's the local environment that we have with a right to work, no income tax, and a tax structure that is favorable to keep businesses in Tennessee.
Mr. McGarry, how do we compete with Mexico? Their education system better than ours?
No, of course their education system's not better. And you have to factor in a lot of different ideas when you're talking about international business and international trade, whether it's the value of the peso, whether it's their regulation, the regulatory system, whether it's the amount of money a worker makes in Mexico. Same thing in China, right? So we talk about minimum wage and so forth. We also talk about child labor, so forth and so on. So there are a lot of different variables here that factor into what actually actually becomes a final decision of where a company goes. But I would say this, we have, as a state, celebrated a lot of successes. And I believe that these successes are very commendable. Again, we talk about Amazon, we talk about Volkswagen, Fokker, we talk about Alstom. We talk about a lot of different companies that have chosen to come to Tennessee. The question becomes why? Why have they chosen to come here? And by the way, please, can we get off the subject of state income tax? It's a moot issue. Our Constitution bans it. It's not an issue. No one that I know of is really going to champion this issue. It's moot, okay? So let's not act like it's an issue. It's not. The reality is, when you ask our two U.S. senators, Corker and Alexander, does Tennessee have a regulatory problem? Their answer was no. So lest we think that the state of Tennessee is doing something that inhibits business, it's just not true. It's not true at all. So our job as legislators, and as my job as someone who would hope to represent you on a state level, would be to continue to make sure that regulation is put in place that works. Regulation that doesn't work needs to be removed. It's really that simple. Will we be able to get everything that comes our way? No. But what we can do is we can say we're serious. Small businesses, because let's not just only limit this to large businesses. Small businesses also, their ability to get started, to go from idea to actually opening the doors, making sure there's not unnecessary paperwork and a lot of legalese and bureaucracy. These are the things that we can continue to make sure we're focusing on to ensure that whether we're talking small business or large business, we're staying on top of the issue.
Mr. Gardenhire.
I'd like to respond to
yes.
that, please. I mentioned state income tax as a plus, not a minus. I'm surprised that Mr. McGarry doesn't understand that it's not in the Constitution right now that we not have a state income tax. That vote is actually coming up in the first section, 2013, to put a constitutional amendment on the voting ballot for 2014, and you have to have a 2/3 majority in both houses to vote on it. So that is not a moot point. That vote is coming up, and I'm here to tell everybody in this room and listen to this audience and on the radio and anywhere else that wants to hear it, Todd Gardenhire will vote against a state income tax, period.
Okay. Mr. McGarry, just for clarification,
yes.
You vote for it or against it?
I would vote against it. And when
Thank you. That's all
okay.
I need.
Well, all right.
Mr. Ramsey?
Well, since I was the gun questioner, as opposed to careers and education, I have another question that is, I don't know how popular it would be on the popularity of the questions that we gave back in the primary, but there's been a lot of controversy concerning the appointment of appellate judges in Tennessee and tightening the laws regarding judicial misconduct. And my question is, do you believe that the Tennessee merit-based judicial selection process should be changed? If so, to what and why? And another question, have any of the judges who have been selected as a result of the merit-based judicial selection been disciplined to either one of your knowledge?
Mr. McGarry.
I'll answer the last question first. Not to my knowledge, no, that one has been disciplined. And in regards to the first question, I believe it's two parts when we talk about the appointment of appellate judges and whether or not that should be changed or whether it should be kept as is. I know that there are views on both sides. One side would say we need to open this up for the public so that now we get politics out the way and that citizens now have the opportunity to appoint. The other side would say, no, actually, this needs to be done by a smaller group that can actually look at credentials to ensure that individuals are actually able to do the job. And I think this is an issue that needs to be carefully studied. And I would not move action one way or the other at this point because I still think there needs to be more discussion on this issue. I'll tell you why. As listening to both sides, I can see how both sides are making valid points. And I do not think at this point that there is actually one that's better than the other. I will say this concerning the actual election process of judges. Historically, and this goes back to the question of has anyone been disciplined, we've had a system that works. And for one reason or another, we now see that there are forces at play that want to change this system. And I, again, want to kind of go very slowly because this is a major change. We're talking the highest court on the state level. And I want to ensure that we're doing the right thing and we're not just allowing politics to determine which direction we go.
Mr. Gardenhire, a very important issue, oftentimes overlooked, I think, in terms of the public discussion, has been in the legislature. What about merit-based selections versus election?
First of all, I'm all for 100% following what our state constitution says. Our state constitution says that they shall be elected by the people. Now, some time ago, a couple of years ago, the state legislature and everybody decided to kind of waffle on that and make it, well, the legislature, they can vote on it and whatever. We need to follow what the Constitution says. If we don't like what the Constitution says, then we need to change the Constitution. I've been involved in judicial elections. I've been campaign manager for several judges. I've been finance chairman for several judges. And there's nothing more unpleasant than going and trying to raise money for a judicial candidate and trying to keep it above board, trying to keep it at a minimum like you're supposed to with full disclosure and everything else, because there's always somebody in there that's got their axes to grind or got a motive for helping somebody. You can always have somebody that's very wealthy run for a judge and outspend somebody. Well, you know, that's obviously not a good system. If I had to pick one, if I was forced today to pick a system to do it, it would be neither the fully elected by the people system, and it would surely not be what we have now. I would love to see it almost like we have on a federal level, and this is just off the cuff, but I would love to see it where the governor makes the appointment and it's confirmed by the Senate. But we have to change the Constitution in order to do that. We can't just study it and everything else. It's got to go through the process, go to the people for a vote, and then change it. Otherwise, I'm of the opinion we follow what the Constitution says, and that's not what's being done now, in my opinion.
Mr. Gardenhire, a question that's relatively new to the questions that have been presented, but is an issue that many states and many local governments are facing. The national government is facing it from the issue of the Social Security Fund. As you know, governments provide pension benefits for governmental employees. And over the years, we've seen many of those pension benefits extended in terms of the amount, lessening the amount of time that pension benefits can be earned in. Recently, the legislature passed a bill lowering the number of years to 25 years of service. California, they say, is close to $100 billion upside down in their potential pension benefits over the life of it. What do we do about pension benefits for government workers? Should they be the same as generally what prevails in the free market system or not?
Well, first of all, if a individual is been promised a pension, and that's why they came to work for an organization, then those people ought not be tampered with. They came to work with that expectation, they were promised that expectation, and the state should pay for that expectation. Whether it was a good choice or not a good choice, it doesn't matter. They were promised that. However, you can look at new hires, and you can look at people that are just hired for the last couple of years or something, and you can tailor it to the marketplace and see what's going on. Pension underfunding comes from several reasons, and a lot of it comes because municipalities use too high of an assumption level to keep their contributions down. And we see municipalities getting way underfunded, sometimes 35% underfunded in their municipalities, and they keep pushing it away by saying, well, we're using our actuarial assumptions, and they said we had to make 7%, but we're losing money for the past 10 years. Well, that's a problem that the elected officials of these municipalities have not been willing to face up to, because it takes money away from their pet projects. And I think if a municipality is going to have a pension fund, they should fully fund it, even if it's at the expense of all these nice, warm, and fuzzy things in the community that they like to see happen.
Mr. McGarry, we're living longer. Folks who retire earlier continuing to live longer. What does that portend for the pension and retirement funds? Should we make some changes that would be required at the state level, similar to we made some changes with reference to emergency workers, made those benefits easier to get?
Yes, and I would say, particularly on a municipality, again, having served on city council, which is a distinction between my opponent and myself, I've actually served in local government, so I'm not just talking theory, I can tell you what's actually happened. On a local level, there aren't pet projects for local legislators. There are 9 of us on city council, for example, and we don't have individual projects that we can fund. There is only one general fund, and we as a council, we vote as a group on that fund. neither one of us are able to say my own project or a pet project. As a result, we have dealt with fire and police pension boards who have told us 2008 that there was a major substantial loss. The diversification of that portfolio took some major hits. As a result, we were upside down in a lot of areas, and we've had to now reevaluate what that means. And I think when we talk about on a state level, some of the same decisions and some of the same criteria that we entertained on a local level do apply. We, as a municipality, we did have to look at what entails tenure, what entails being vested, if you want to use the actual technical term. And we dealt long and hard with that, and we said, yes, we need to make some changes. And it was painful because we had some employees, again, that told us that we came work for the city with these particular expectations, and now we were being told that this has to change. And we said, financially, we're in a very difficult place, and this is what we have to do. However, what we also did is we ensured that those individuals, again, that were most represented, those that had most at stake, were at the table, who are helping us and guiding the conversation, so that we could say, as legislators on a local level, we weren't just making a decision unanimously, but we took the best interest of what we were hearing, and we tried to respect and protect what was there as much as possible. So if you have to make those decisions, it's important that you make those decisions not to drain and not to get political or philosophical points, but to protect what's there. And you make the decisions that do the least harm, but are able to make you financially solvent.
Gentlemen, we have,
I'd like
yes.
to respond to that, Mr.
Quickly,
Gary.
if you will, we have 3.5 minutes to go. And we're going to have to close.
Mr. Gary was wrong. I was actually the one that the mayor asked to take a good look at the city's pension fund and the fire and police fund, and it wasn't the diversification of the assets, it was the marketplace, and they were totally underfunded. They were only given 10% of their salary. I suggested they put 20% in, and the city commission rejected it.
One-word answer. Should we pass restrictions at the state level to make certain that all governmental entities follow restrictive measures to make sure they are properly funded? Something that I think you're suggesting. One-word answer. Yes or no?
Yes.
Ask that again.
Should the state pass legislation that restricts the prospect of underfunding?
To local municipalities?
Yes.
No, they should leave that to local municipalities.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. McGarry, your closing remarks, and if you will, please limit those to about 1 minute and 45 seconds.
I'll be happy to. Again, it's been a pleasure to be here tonight to take the questions that you have posed to us as proof that you are concerned about the future of this state and that you certainly have issues that you want to see addressed by your state legislatures. Let me be clear. There are a lot of differences between my opponent and myself. He's a 40-year political operative who has been involved in politics from Reagan upward, basically in appointed positions. I have worked and I have become elected, which means that I am accountable to the people who have put me in office, not for political payback. As a result, I have sought to make decisions that I believe are in the best interest of those who I represent, because they have elected me in office and there's a trust there. Whether that's my involvement with gangs, whether that's my involvement with bringing jobs into this community, on a wide variety of levels, I have sought to be accountable, and I will continue to be accountable by putting forth new ideas. As you can see, there is a difference in regards to how I communicate. I have showed up for every debate that's been offered. I have a website. You can see my views anywhere you want to see them, and you can know where I stand on the issues. My opponent, unfortunately, has not done that. He has said that it's unimportant for you to know where he stands on the issues, and he shows up to debates only when he's backdoored into doing so. I think it's important that you know that how we campaign is how we'll govern. And I think you can look at how I've done so.
Mr. Gardenhire, as quickly as you can, sir.
Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to be here to see the differences between my opponent and myself. I have been involved in politics a long time, and I've learned one thing. The best way to campaign for an office and to help people run for an office is actually go out and meet the people. And I've been doing that. I've been going door to door. I've been going to civic clubs and speaking. I've been holding forums myself. You know, when you go out and you go to the local Hardee's, or you go to the Masonic Lodge for the breakfasts, or you go to the chili cook-offs up here in Bradley County, and you meet the people that are actually there, the actual voters, you find out real quick what's on their minds, and you can see, and they can see if you're sincere or not. And that's the best way to campaign. I've been doing this for a long time. I believe in the system of one-on-one campaigning and talking to people, answering their questions, and I can only make you one promise, and that's all I'll make. If Todd Gardenhire ever makes you a promise, I'll keep it. If I can't keep it, I'll be man enough to come to you and tell you I can't keep it and face the consequences of that decision.
Ladies and gentlemen, your candidates for the 10th State Senate, thank you very much. Thanks to Cleveland State Community College. Thanks to the Cleveland Daily Banner, WCLE, and WTNB. This concludes the 10th State Senate Forum.
Thank you.
Yours too.
Thank you.